Dungeon Crawl Classics Dying Earth. We're diving back in. We're going to talk about the different classes or jobs that you can play within this setting for Dungeon Crawl Classics. Today, it's the Magician. Hey everybody, Jordan here. The PH is silent. We're going to dive more into Dungeon Crawl Classics The Dying Earth, specifically the Magician, which operates on Vancian magic, which will feel a lot like the wizard that you're used to with 3.5 and up of Dungeons & Dragons, where you have spell slots and you can learn a certain number of spells per day, and then you can cast a certain number of spells per day. The Magician really solidifies the magic in a controllable way, which is very Vancian and very Dying Earth, so it kind of makes sense. But let's dive into the PDF and we'll talk about it more. Here we are, the Dungeon Crawl Classics Dying Earth, the Player's Librum. This has all of the player stuff for it, and it's going to have the new character classes that we can play in Dungeon Crawl Classics The Dying Earth. Now, the game is really... you're able to mix and match classes from all over. But specifically in the Lankmar set, it said, don't use Dungeon Crawl Classics Clerics in here if you're going to use this other alternative way of healing, which involved spending fleeting luck in order to heal. And that's because Lankmar doesn't have clerics in that traditional kind of Dungeons & Dragons sense. So they invented a new way for you to heal. This one does have healing in it, and it even allows you to play clerics and gives you some gods and stuff that you can play within here. So this really does feel like almost an expansion of classes. Like if you wanted to take a magician from this and play it just in a regular DCC campaign, I think you really could do that, and it would be a lot of fun. And a lot of these spells can be cast by wizards or witches or clerics or magicians, and you could take all of those and kind of play with it, do with it as you will. So the Magician learns things by Rote Magic, which is a very specific set of instructions that allow you to cast a spell. If you're not familiar with regular wizards in Dungeon Crawl Classics, magic in DCC original is very chaotic and unpredictable. And that's because these are forces that man was not really meant to play with. And so when you start dipping a toe into the arcane magic of craziness, you're going to have side effects. And that's where corruption comes in, which is different from a magician that knows magic like the rote magic. So the rules for magic are different for this class. And it says right here, the rules of Rote Magic are intended to reflect the Dying Earth novels, where practitioners of magic may spend a lifetime accumulating the knowledge of how to cast a spell, and once learned, force the spell into their minds for a single casting. However, some players, judges and players might feel that being limited to only one version of a spell may be too restrictive, even with the ability to reroll Rote Magic at each level. So it gives you some alternatives. You can kind of go back, but we're going to talk about this a little bit. So you are a magician. You get 1d6 hit points. Weapons, training, you're proficient with darts, dart gun, dagger, longsword, and staff. You don't wear armor because it hinders your spellcasting. That's kind of very common in a lot of fantasy tropes. So a magician can be of any alignment. Rote magic. The archmagicians of the past have glimpsed the underlying patterns of magic and created new spells to vibrate and twist the fabric of space. Magicians in the 21st eon are more crafters than innovators, building on the work of those who came before. Consequently, a magician learns magic by rote, relying on the magical pathways that have been forged by past magicians and passed down through the eons. One typically learns a single way to cast a spell, reflecting how spell formulas are passed between or acquired from other practitioners, but does so with a high degree of accuracy. So let's open up DCC, the role-playing game, and actually see how wizards work, just so we know, specifically casting magic, because everything else is kind of the same. So a wizard is going to do a spell check. You roll a d20, you add your caster level and your spell check modifier, which is usually intelligence if you're a wizard. We're going to focus on wizards. And then you add all of that up, and you compare it to the spell that you're trying to cast. You can't cast a second level spell if you are level 1, and but you can cast a level 1, 2, or 3 spell if you are level 4. They also ask you or allow you to like reverse spells, so you could learn Mend and actually reverse it to Rip, but that it would be a separate spell that you learn. A lot of this is the exact same because it's core rules, and so crits and fumbles, concentrations, and then saving throws against spells are the DC is equal to what you rolled for the spell check. So if I'm casting Color Spray and I roll a 17, the spell save DC is 17, which is a little weird and broken because you can obliterate an entire army of people by getting, well, your spell save DC is 32, and I don't see you hitting that with a 20-sided die anytime soon. But that's DCC for you. There also is the ability of Spellburn, where I can burn my physical stats, which is taking them away 1 point at a time before I roll my spell to add my magic, or to add to the bonus of the roll. So if I am a wizard and I am going to roll, I have a third level wizard with 2 intelligence, so I have a +5 to this roll. But I really, really want it to succeed or do something awesome, so I can burn 3 points of my stamina, and then I will have a 5 + 3 and 8 on this roll. So that heals back slowly over time, but you can do that. Now, the difference between Vancian magic and this wizard is that you don't have spell slots. I have a certain number of spells that I know, but it's not, I can cast those as many times as I want as long as I succeed. And what I mean by that is if we go and look at, this is fun because it's corruption. So you start out as like a regular guy up here in the top right or top left corner, and you're slowly getting corrupted until you look like this guy down below. And it's just super, super fun. So let's look at a spell called Chill Touch. Level 1 spell, range of touch, casting time 1 action. It's a will save versus your check that you're doing. And so if I am a wizard, I'm going to cast this. Let's say I have my +5. I roll my d20. I have a +5. If I roll a 2 to an 11, I have lost the spell and it doesn't actually fire. So your turn is just kind of wasted, which a lot of people don't like when I have had them play wizards in Dungeon Crawl Classics, is they're like, so it's just gone? I'm like, yeah, it's gone. And I can't cast it again? I'm like, well, there's certain rules that allow you to cast it again, but for the most part, you just lost your spell. Like, bye, it's gone. And for some players in DCC, this can be a 50-50 chance, especially at level 1. And so you're like, I just want to do something with my magic, but you lost your spell and it is gone because you rolled a 2 to an 11. But if I roll a 12 to a 13, the spell takes effect. And the higher the roll, the more powerful the spell will be. So in this instance, a 12 to 13, my caster's hands are charged with negative energy. On the next round, the next creature that caster attacks with takes an additional 1d6 damage. Undead creatures take an additional +2 points of damage. All the way to, let's look at 32, the caster's body glows a sickly blue light as he crackles with withering necromantic energy. Any creature within 10 feet of the caster takes 1d6 damage each round it stays within the field, and undead creatures take 1d6 +2 until the next sunrise. Until the next sunrise, the caster receives a +8 bonus to all attack rolls, and every creature the caster attacks takes an additional 3d6 damage. Undead suffering an extra +8. So you just become this powerhouse of Chill Touch.
It's over 9,000!
I believe, I'm going to get called out in the comments, but I believe the rule is that if I roll a 20 to 23, but I actually wanted the ability of an 18 to 19 or lower, I could take that. Because certain spells have, I didn't want to fully transform into a frog for like a day. I just wanted to breathe underwater for an hour. And so certain spells will have that adjustment. You can take the lower one if you roll too high. And at level 1, you're not probably going to be able to cast this at a 32+, but that's the point, is that the level 1 spell will get more powerful as you progress in levels, because the odds of you hitting a 2 to 11 is going to be less when you're rolling a +7 or 8 And maybe even on this spell, you roll a d24 or a d30. So that's kind of how traditional wizards work. You can cast a spell as many times as you want until you lose it by rolling low. Transferring over to the magician. A magician has a Rote Magic check. And so whenever they learn a new spell, they're going to roll this Rote Magic check. And it is you roll a d16 plus intelligence modifier plus caster level. And this improves over time. And so, yeah, but when you roll on a spell, the minimum that you will get is the lowest spell check. But that is you practicing the spell, and when you acquire the spell, you roll that, and then you have that. So the cool thing about this is I know when I cast the spell, it's like locked in my brain, and I'm able to just cast it. So players that don't like the chaos of the DCC wizard, the DCC magician is I roll ahead of time. I know what my spell's going to do. It's locked away like, I don't know, like a bullet in a gun. And then when I fire it, I'll get that effect. However, because it's DCC, if you roll a natural one, you're still going to have bad things, and you have to roll on the wizardly objurgation table. So there's extra things that we'll get into a little bit. It does say that you can burn luck to modify the spell while you're learning the spell. Again, this is the only time that you're rolling it is when you learn it. So you could bump it up with luck to get it to a higher result that is then locked in. Every time you rest, you'll refill your level or your Vancian magic spell slots, and then you get the same exact spell again. So it's kind of cool. Now, when you advance to a new level, you can choose to re-roll for a spell effect. So if we go back to Chill Touch, I'm level 1. Let's say I rolled my d16 plus 1 plus my intelligence of 3, so I have like a plus 4. Well, that's a lot. Let's say a plus 2 or something. So I roll my d16 plus 2, and I get an 8. Well, an 8 is lost in failure. But because I'm a magician, I get the very least success automatically. So even though I rolled and I failed, I get this because I am a magician. And so I will always have this, and I have this effect. Now I level up to level 2. And I am looking at this and I'm like, well, what's the worst that can happen? I could get a 14 or to a 19 or even a 20, or I could stay with what I have. Because there's not a big risk involved, I'm going to take this. So when I level up, I re-roll, and this is me working on and honing the spell and getting better at it. And all of a sudden, this time I roll 18 and 19. Let's say I roll an 18. And so now it says the caster's hands are charged with negative energy for the next turn, and a turn is 10 minutes. The caster receives a +2 to attack rolls, and every creature that the caster attacks takes an additional 1d6 damage. So I'm getting not just the 1d6 damage of earlier, but now that I'm level 2, this spell's a little cooler, a little more powerful for me, and that's awesome. And because you're adding your level to these checks, every time you level, you will have a better chance of learning this than you did, or of getting a better result than before, just because of numbers. It says here that even when you re-roll spells, you can choose the new result or keep the existing one. So as I level up, I could re-roll for all of them and be like, I don't really like that. I'm going to keep the existing one because every spell is different, so it makes sense that you might do that. However, when rolling a natural 1 on the spell check to re-roll an already known spell, you have to roll on the wizardly objurgation table, regardless of whether they choose to keep the existing existing result. So I'm going to move forward a little bit. Memorization. Unlike a wizard who does not rely on patterns for casting magic, a magician must force the complex formulas that represent spells into their mind through memorization. Otherwise, the spell cannot be cast. A magician without other protective charms or talismans must select which spells to prepare carefully. Many a magician have found themselves untimely incommode after having expended all their spell slots for the day. So, it's really hard to memorize spells too. In the world of Dying Earth, spells are living things that are manipulated and have magicians have learned to manipulate them. And this living energy or complex mathematical formula that is alive in some sense, is stored in your brain. And then when you want this effect to happen, you let it out. And then it is gone from your brain. And you have to go back and redo all of that crazy mathematical formula memorization in order to put the knowledge back in there. It's not something that we retain. That's really where we get spell slots. So a first level magician may memorize 3 spells of the lesser spells, representing years of training one's mind and practice. Sometimes you'll get a check that says, roll this spell at a D24 or a D30. Magicians don't get that option. Instead, they roll with their D16, but whatever result they get 1 better permanently. So if I have a +1 die when I roll this particular spell because of Mercurial Magic or other spell modifications, I'm just going to get the next better result every time I roll. Now, magicians can't burn their physical stats like strength and agility, stamina, to spell burn, but they have something called, they have a couple of things, force of will and empowered spells. So empowered spells, they can discard a memorized spell, like I don't want to use that anymore. They burn 1 point of personality and empower the casting of the other spell that's in their brain, creating a result of 1 higher than that which was desired. When casting a memorized spell, the magician does not make a new spell check, but instead they apply the effect of the spell as if it had been cast with a spell check equal to the original spell check used to learn it, adhering to the spell's scripted casting time. A magician can also choose to attempt to bend the underlying pattern of magic to amplify their casting from its fixed spell check by making an amplification roll. And I want to point that out, that this amplification die is something that you'll be able to play around with to increase the power of your spells. It starts out at a D3 and goes up to a D16. So going back to Chill Touch, I have Chill Touch memorized and I have Choking Cloud. I know that my Chill Touch will be an 18 to 19, but I was like, man, I could really use 2d6 damage instead of 1d6 damage. I would really like to do that. So I come over here and I just say, I'm going to forget you, Choking Cloud, and boom, it's gone. But when I come over here, instead of casting it like this, I automatically get it upcast, which is kind of cool. At the expense of burning personality, which is, that's part of the game, burning stats. And force of will. So unlike a wizard, a magician cannot spell burn, but instead, in times of dire need, a magician can effect raw magical afflictions by drawing upon the basic patterns of magic to shatter objects or counter spells through exerting one's own will. To do so, a magician expends a minimum of 1 point of personality and makes a force of will check, which is a d20 plus caster level plus the expended personality. And you do a force of will. And the personality expended in this way returns as per the rules for healing spellburn damage. So you get 1 recovery per day. Force of will can also be used to counter any spell cast at the magician. I wanted to come over here. So we have our action die, which is like attacks and stuff. And then we have our Rote Magic spell check. So you're only a D16 when you are level 1. And then as of level 2, you get a D20. And by level 4, you're rolling at a D24 for your magic. And by level 6, you're rolling at a D30, all the way up to a D30 plus 4 at level 10, which is the maximum. So you can get some really solid spells. And this scales up because the failure check for level 2 spells and level 3 spells are a lot higher than level 1 spells. So this really does make sense. And with memorized spells, it says numbers in parentheses indicate the number of formidable spells that you may memorize without risking the magician's sanity. Any spell with a Rote Magic spell check of 20 or greater, regardless of level, is considered one of these formidable spells, which the magician must treat with care. At any given time, a magician may only memorize a number of formidable spells equal to one's level. Memorizing more requires that the magician burn 1 point of personality, temporarily as if utilizing spell burn. And for each such spell to hold so you have to burn that personality to hold these more powerful spells. And that's any spell where you rolled over 20 or above. But again, if you roll that, you can always take the lesser one if you want to. Whenever a spell description calls for required spell burn, a magician can substitute personality for the required strength, stamina, or agility. But I want to talk about amplification rolls. So an amplification roll, by understanding the patterns of magic, you can manipulate the underlying phlogiston to amplify castings from a fixed spell check. So you risk losing control of the spell and its effects, transfiguring the casting into a weakened version of the spell, or even rendering the spell a solvent of magical effects. The master math magician...
Oh, I'm not the kind of magician who does tricks. I'm a mathematician.
Mathematician, sorry. The amplification roll requires 2 dice of the same number of faces, preferably of different colors, the up die and the down die. At first level, a magician's amplification die is a D3. So to make an amplification check, the caster rolls both the up die and the down die and determines the resulting amplification as effect as follows. If both dice show 1, then the spell is lost for the day. So if you roll these 2d3, if both show 1s, then you've lost the spell. And you also have to roll on the spell failure table as if a natural 1 was rolled. If the down die is larger than the up die, the caster subtracts the value of the down die from the fixed spell check, and this may result in the spell being lost if the new spell check value is low. Now, if the up die is equal to or larger than the down die, then the caster adds the value of the up die to the fixed spell check, which means I go up 2 or 3 points. Awesome. If both dice show the maximum, then the caster adds the sum of both dice to the spell check. So if I roll a 3 and a 3, then I add 6 to my spell check, which would bump it up maybe even a couple of spaces. And that is an amplification roll using the amplification dice. Kind of confusing. And I think if you want to do that, you just declare like, hey, I want to try and bump this up another level. Certain conditions can cause the magician to make a forced amplification roll when casting a memorized spell, including wearing any kind of heavy armor, which is interesting. In addition, casting memorized spells requires the magician's full concentration, or they risk losing control of the forces they are attempting to shape and uttering a malapropism during the key part of the invocation, or irreversibly altering the inflection. While casting a memorized spell, the standard DCC rules for concentration apply. A magician can take no action beyond walking at half speed, combat damage, a fall, or other significant interruptions. Casting a memorized spell require the spellcaster to make a DC 11 will save or lose focus. And that was Magicians. This probably was a longer video than I anticipated, but there is a lot there. The thing I like about this is, I was explaining to some of my friends, the Magician feels like a D&D wizard, and the DCC wizard feels like what a D&D sorcerer should be, where I can manipulate magic, but I don't really understand how it works. I just know that I'll get this effect. Maybe it'll be good, maybe it won't. Whereas the scholarly magician, the DCC magician, has studied this to like ad nauseum, and they now know how to cast this spell and will always successfully cast it at whatever level that they originally rolled it for. I like this a lot, though. Like, it really opened up magic, and I think some of my players that really revel in chaos will enjoy the DCC wizard, but I have a lot of friends that would really like this magician. And honestly, I want to play magician. I think this is really fun. Some of the other classes that we're going to be looking at is the Vatborn, the Wayfinder, and the cool thing about Dying Earth is a lot of these characters can cast magic, and it's all using the magician rules. So what do you think? Are you playing DCC Dying Earth? Are you enjoying it? Are you subscribing for more DCC coverage? Got a Patreon and a bunch of other stuff. I'm writing things there. It's fun. I've got another channel that's all about D&D lore, but I am currently running a Peril of the Purple Planet campaign, and I think when we finish that up, we might switch over to DCC Dying Earth, because it's so cool. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I will see you all in the next video.